Good morning. Our opening words are by Barbara Pescan. For the beauty of the earth, the spinning blue-green ball, yes, Gaia, mother of everything, we walk gently across your back to come together again, to remember how we can live, to create how we can be. Gaia, our home, the lap in which we live, welcome us into this time together. Please rise in body and spirit for our opening hymn, number 1000, in your teal hymnals.
Welcome to First Parish in Bedford, a Unitarian Universalist congregation where we come together every Sunday to remember who we are and imagine together how we can be. Whoever you are, whomever you love, whether you worship one God, many gods, or no God, you are welcome here. The spirit of liberal religion calls us to lead lives of integrity and courage and kindness, calls us to care for each other and for our earth, calls us to bring more love and justice into the world, and challenges us to grow in wisdom and understanding by the light of our own reason and experience in conversation with the larger community of seekers and thinkers and dreamers, and in fierce protection of the intellectual and spiritual freedom of all people. If any of that sounds good to you, welcome. You may be in the right place. Welcome. I want to say a special welcome to our visitors this morning. We are so glad you are with us today, in person and on Zoom. Zoomers, we are so glad you are with us today. Here in the sanctuary, you are invited to fill out a blue connection card. You will find it at the end of your row of pews. And you can give it to one of the ushers during the offering, and we will add you to our information system and add you to our mailing list. In Zoom, we will put a link to the chat. You can click on it. It'll take you to a virtual connection card. Parents and caregivers of little ones, there's a nursery available downstairs for your convenience, but we are always super delighted to have the little ones here in our sanctuary as well. And finally, everyone is invited to join us after the service in the common room for coffee, tea, and fellowship. There's also a quiet space upstairs in room 201 with coffee service as an additional place for conversation and connection. A few announcements this morning. First, I want to say a huge thank you to everyone who came out for our Food for Thought event on Friday night and made it such a fun event. We had more than 40 people, at least, of all ages. There was pizza and desserts. There was laughter and thoughtful conversation. It was truly terrific. So if you missed it, be sure to check out the next one. Thank you to Reverend Annie and Lisa Maria for leading the program. And a special thank you to Bill Rabinowitz and Bob Dorr for taking time out of their afternoon to troubleshoot the sound system so we could have like a microphone for the event. I called Bill in Tennessee, like, Bill, I cannot get this thing to work, and he walked me through it. So thank you to Bill and Bob for their heroic services. After the service today, immediately, 11:30 to 1 in the Bacon Room, we are having a special conversation courtesy of our adult religious education program led by Doug Mooter on the future of church. How Americans do church is changing, the institution is changing, and what does that mean for the future of church, for Unitarian Universalism, for First Parish in particular? Let's talk about it. There will be sandwiches and other treats in the common room, so you can grab a bite to eat, and then come in the Bacon Room, sorry. There will be sandwiches and treats in the Bacon Room, so you can go upstairs, grab some refreshments, and settle in. It's going to be a great conversation. Yeah, there may be no bacon in the Bacon Room. It is bring your own bacon today. Finally, Youth Cabaret is March 2nd. We are very excited for its return. Young dancers who want to participate in one of the dance numbers, please reach out to Dorothy Anderson Perales or Lisa Maria if you are interested. Those are our announcements. So now if you will please rise again, we will share in our unison affirmation, which is in your order of service. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. El amor es el espíritu de esta iglesia, y el servicio es su ley. Este es nuestro gran pacto, vivir juntos en paz, buscar la verdad en espíritu de amor, y ayudarnos los unos a los otros. Please be seated. Now we're going to share our story for all ages. Families on Zoom, this is a great time to gather a little closer together around the cozy blue glow of your device. Story is called The Very Wasteful King. Once upon a time, there was a very wasteful king. And one day he tore the sleeve of his royal robe. "Shall I send it to be mended?" asked the Grand Vizier, his chief advisor. And the king had what he thought was a brilliant idea. "No," he said, "don't bother. Throw it away and bring me a new one." "Throw it away?" asked the surprised vizier. "Yes," said the king. "Throw it away." "Where is away?" asked the vizier. The king became annoyed. "Away, away, don't bother me with details." So the vizier had the torn robe placed out back behind the palace, and a new robe was brought to the king. The king was so pleased with this idea that the next day he said, "My shoes have become worn out. Throw them away and bring me new ones." And the shoes went out on the pile behind the palace. "You know," said the king, "this throwing away is convenient. I rather like it. What other things could we throw away?" "Well," said the vizier, "the dishes," the king interrupted. "Why are we always washing dishes after every meal? Throw them away and bring some new ones." He was a very wasteful king. "That would be very expensive," said the vizier. "Then we'll use plastic dishes," said the king, "which have just recently been invented." The king encouraged everyone in the palace to do the same, and soon the pile of items thrown away behind the palace grew to be very large, so large that it grew as high as the great balcony where the king's bedroom window was. "Vizier," said the king, "when I looked out my bedroom window last night, instead of a beautiful starry sky, I saw a pile of trash. I thought I told you to throw this stuff away. If I can see it from my bedroom, that doesn't sound very away to me. Throw it away." The vizier apologized, and he moved the pile of trash to the outskirts of the nearby town, away from the king. But by now all the townspeople had adopted the habits of the palace, and they too were throwing everything away. It was the latest craze. The pile of plastic and garbage grew very, very large indeed, looming over the town. And the townspeople began to complain about the sight and the smell and the litter. "Vizier," said the king, "the townspeople are complaining that the trash pile is ugly and smelly, and plastic bottles are blowing down the sidewalks. I told you to throw it away. If the townspeople can see it, that doesn't sound very away to me. Throw it away." So the vizier put the trash pile on several giant floating barges and anchored them on the river. But by now the whole countryside had adopted the craze for throwing things away, and trash was spilling out over the sides of the barges into the river. It collected along the shores. It bobbed up and down in the water. "Vizier," said the king, "I got a complaint yesterday that the fishermen keep catching plastic bottles instead of fish. There's garbage all up and down the river. I told you to throw it away, away, away." So the desperate vizier cut the anchors to the barges, and the giant rafts of garbage floated out far, far away to sea, where they were not seen or smelled or heard from again. "Now that's what I'm talking about," said the satisfied king. "Throw it away." Then one day, some months later, an amazing thing happened. There on the sandy beach where all the people in the kingdom swam and played and dug sandcastles on the shore of the ocean, right in the middle of the day, a giant sea turtle slowly emerged from the sea. He pulled his body out of the water and then up along the sand with his slow turtle pace. It was perhaps the biggest, oldest turtle anyone had ever seen, with a magnificent old turtle shell. But caught up in all the corners and the crevices of the shell were plastic bottles and plastic bags and bits of string and packaging. It looked a little like this. As the people looked on amazed, the turtle began marching up the beach, one slow turtle step at a time. The plastic rattled on the shell as he walked. From the beach, he marched up the road that led into town, and the people walked behind him. By the time the turtle got to the town, all the people on the beach were walking. He continued through the town, marching on in his slow turtle way up the main highway to the palace. Now all the townspeople were following behind. They'd never seen anything like the giant turtle walking up a road in broad daylight. The turtle walked step by slow turtle step all the way up to the palace. The startled palace guards, faced with the determined turtle and the great crowd behind him, opened the palace doors, and the turtle marched on through, covered in rattling plastic, all the way into the great throne room, and there sat the king on his throne, eating chicken wings out of a disposable plastic bucket. The king stared agog at the giant old turtle and the shell covered all over with plastic, and to everyone's amazement, the giant turtle spoke. "Foolish king," said the turtle, "what you call away, I call home." The king was so surprised, he dropped his bucket of chicken wings. And having delivered his message, the turtle turned around and began the long, slow walk back into the sea. The king stared at the plastic bucket rolling at his feet, and I will leave it to you to tell the end of the story. What do you think he felt? What do you think he should do? Now we're going to sing the children out to their classes with Jason Shelton's Children's Blessing. The words are in your order of service. Children and youth, please go with your RE advisors.
Hello, I am Lisa Toming, and this is the time in our service when you may come up and light a candle of joy or concern as you wish. We ask that you please introduce your name and keep your comments brief as possible. After we speak to the people who line up here, we will check in with those on Zoom. After the service, I will stand here by the candle stand for those who wish to light a candle in silence. For those joys and sorrows that remain silently in our heart.
I would invite you to turn your gaze to our flaming chalice. Can you guys see it from there? This is a wonderful symbol of the spirit of who we are, and it's there consistently. Now, the light of this chalice would soon flicker and die without the oil that nourishes its flame. And just as this flame cannot burn without oil, First Parish, our religious home, cannot survive or thrive without the financial as well as the personal support of its members and friends. We are the oil that keeps the flame of our religious faith alive and fuels our shared mission and ministry. So let us give now freely and generously an offering to sustain and strengthen this community of memory, hope, faith, and love. A Vision by Wendell Berry. If we will have the wisdom to survive, to stand like slow-growing trees on a ruined place, renewing, enriching it, if we will make our seasons welcome here, asking not too much of earth or heaven, then a long time after we are dead, The lives, our lives, prepare will live there, their houses strongly placed upon the valley sides, fields and gardens, rich in the windows. The river will run clear as we have never known it, and over it, birdsong like a canopy. On the levels of the hills will be green meadows, stock bells and noon shade. On the steeps where greed and ignorance cut down the old forest, an old forest will stand, its rich leaf fall drifting on its roots. The veins of forgotten spring will have opened. Families will be singing in the fields. In their voices they will hear a music risen out of the ground. They will take nothing from the ground. They will not return, whatever the grief at parting. Memory, native to this valley, will spread over it like a grove. A memory will grow into legend, legend into song, song into sacrament. The abundance of this place, the songs of its people and its birds will be health and wisdom and indwelling light. There is no paradisal dream. Its hardship is its possibility.
Where is a way? Where is a way? So much of what we call environmental justice is an examination of that question. Where is a way? Who gets to decide? How do we decide? When we throw it away, whose backyard becomes a way? Sometimes, as in our story, a way is the ocean. And now there is something called the Great Pacific Garbage Patch that is slowly shredding microplastics into the ocean ecosystem. That's one story of a way. When we bring the story of a way back on land here in the United States, it is the old story of racism and power politics. When we throw it away, when we bury it, when we allow it to run off into rivers and streams, when it seeps into the soil, when the particulates saturate the air we breathe, a way is defined as whoever and wherever is most easily overlooked or forgotten or silenced, which more often than not means poor communities, and in particular, it means black and brown communities. In fact, race is the most significant predictor of whether someone lives near toxic waste. Race is the most significant predictor of whether someone is exposed to unsafe water or air or soil. 2019 study published in Environmental Science and Technology found black people have the highest exposure to fine particulate matter air pollution, the kind generated by power plants, across all income levels, corrected for socioeconomic status. 2023 study published in Nature Energy shows that since 1940s, the location of power plants is highly correlated with the old redlining maps that were published by the federal government in the 1930s, the ones that were used to deny black communities access to mortgage loans and keep them starved of resources and keep them cramped into substandard, aging, deteriorating housing. Those ones. They determined where the power plants were also placed. In 2009, environmental scholar Rob Nixon of Princeton University coined the term slow violence. Slow violence. To describe a kind of harm that is done slowly over time by the accretion of negative consequences. We're talking about exposure to toxins in the environment, the denial of resources to communities, chronic stress that builds up day by day, impacting mental well-being and the body. Slow violence is often invisible when it is happening. It is difficult, if not impossible, to say exactly who is responsible or to hold anyone accountable. It is often the impersonal result of bad systems rather than of individual bad actors. But over time, it can be as deadly as the kind of violence we usually think of when we think of violence. 2021 BBC article by Richard Fisher called "The Unseen Slow Violence That Affects Millions" gives the example of Louisiana's so-called Cancer Alley. Cancer Alley is an 85-mile stretch of land in Louisiana that over time has become so densely packed with power plants and chemical production plants that the cancer rates for the people who live there can be 50 times higher than the national average. These regions of intensely concentrated industrial production with the associated concentrated toxicity, they've come to be called industrial sacrifice zones. Industrial sacrifice zones. They are usually populated by poor, black, brown, or otherwise marginalized people. And I learned there is unfortunately another example of slow violence. This one hits close to home for me. It is my dear old Indianapolis. It is rarely a good thing when Indiana makes the news, honestly. And a few months ago, first parish member, Mari Dancer, who is now on the Worship Associates team, by the way, sent me an article about Indiana, and I went, oh. It's written by Elizabeth Kreider Reed, the Chancellor Professor of Anthropology and Museum Studies at Indiana University. It's titled, "The Importance of Shining a Light on Hidden Toxic Histories." And it describes how Indianapolis is the home of one of the nation's largest Superfund cleanup sites for dry cleaning chemicals. I did not know this. Lived in Indianapolis for 20 plus years. Did not know this. But anyway, for 50 plus years in Indianapolis, there was a popular local dry cleaning company, I recognize the name, with storefronts all over town, but they sent the clothes to be processed at a particular plant in a certain neighborhood, and they stored the chemicals that were used in tanks underground in that same neighborhood. And those chemicals leaked down at least a mile down into the water table, including wells that fed the city. The commercial dry cleaning plant was located in a residential neighborhood. The EPA Superfund website says 10,000 people live within a mile of this site. I will let you guess whether this is a wealthy neighborhood. In 2012, when the contamination was discovered, the EPA found that toxic vapors were actually seeping up from the soil and entering people's homes. So they were breathing in the fumes from these dry cleaning chemicals. Required mitigation in many cases. And meanwhile, after a decade of corrective action, I understand that this plume of chemicals is continuing to spread through the soil underground, 500 feet from a major tributary of Indianapolis's White River. And I imagine it is still spreading. Slow violence is slow until it is not. It is slow until the particulates in the air turn into cancer in the body. It's slow until the toxic stress of racism and community neglect turns decades later into heart disease. It's slow until low infant birth weight, itself an environmental factor, leads to childhood asthma, which is coupled with exposure to environmental toxins and decreased access to health care. And the end result of all of this means a black child is 4.5 times more likely to land in the hospital than a white child, and more than 7 times more likely to die of asthma. It is harm that is imperceptibly slow, that can accumulate over decades, that is diffused throughout the environment and then lands with savage force on those with less power to resist it. There's an old joke. One man asks another, "How did you go bankrupt?" The other replies, "Very slowly and then all at once." The internet tells me this is actually a misquote of a Hemingway line from The Sun Also Rises. The actual line is gradually and then suddenly. But the phrase has taken on a life of its own. You know how that goes. So very slowly and then all at once. And when I think about that phrase, very slowly and then all at once, I actually think about climate change. Once upon a time, way back in the 90s, when I was fresh out of high school, global warming was the thing that Al Gore told us that we should worry about. Some people did, some people didn't. Some models said this, some models said that. And it was possible to be concerned about it, and yet it all seemed pretty far off and pretty abstract. It was like something we should definitely address if we care at all about the future, but it was the future. And then, all of a sudden, it was our present. Very slowly, and then all at once, in wildfires and hurricanes and droughts and floods, in 100-year or 1,000-year weather events that seem to happen every year now. It is here now. And so now we are under tremendous pressure to respond to this present danger, and many of us are feeling the urgency to respond very quickly, and we should be. And tackling the problem of climate change is going to take many different approaches. Climate author Katharine Hayhoe says, there's no silver bullet to dealing with climate change, but there are silver buckshot. Right? Many different approaches, each one having an impact, and we need the collective, all of these things, to slow climate change, to deal with this looming problem. And some of those approaches, some of that silver buckshot, right, these are going to be technological solutions. Right, we know that. There's going to need to be an enormous transformation of our energy sector carried out with unprecedented speed. And at the same time, although it feels very counterintuitive to say it, there's also a danger in going too fast. In fact, sometimes we're going to need to slow down a little, because the changes that we need to make need to be made in relationship with the people who will be impacted by those changes. And relationships take time to build. And building trust and mutual understanding also takes time, and discerning answers together and paths forward also takes time. Now, you would think it would be very easy for us all to come together on this, right? Climate change is the ultimate uniter, or at least it should be. It's an existential threat. No one can insulate themselves from its effect. We have, in the end, just the one planet. We all have a stake in this. And yet, in the short run, like other examples of slow violence, the harm of climate change falls disproportionately on the communities with the fewest resources to mitigate its effects, right? The harm of climate change falls disproportionately on poor communities, marginalized communities, black and brown communities. So there's a justice issue embedded right into climate change when we talk about environmental justice. And in fact, the people who are least responsible for climate change are the ones who are most likely to be harmed by it. And there's also justice issues embedded in how we address climate change. Because in that technological transformation, right, we're going to need to build wind farms and solar farms and nuclear power plants, maybe. Where do they go? And if carbon capture is part of the picture, all of that carbon we capture is going to need to be stored somewhere. Where will it be buried? More electric means more batteries. Where will they be manufactured? Where will they be disposed of? We need a green transformation of our energy sector, our industrial sector, our transportation sectors. And if we think of that transformation only in technological terms, as a purely scientific problem, as an engineering problem, if we don't apply a justice lens to this transformation, then we could easily find ourselves perpetuating the slow violence of the past, even as we are trying to do good for our future, by leaving marginalized communities to bear all of these hidden costs of this transformation. I can tell you in Indianapolis, like many places, we ran interstates through black neighborhoods in the 60s and 70s in the name of progress, with devastating impact on those communities. And I can imagine just as easily we can run solar farms through those same communities and devastate them all over again. Applying a justice lens means that impacted communities need to be involved as decision makers at every stage of this transformation. And those who already bear the cost of historic slow violence should not be made to take on still more burdens. So as an example of what this might look like, the Saturday before last, I attended a community event in Concord. led by the Massachusetts Environmental Justice Legislative Table. Community event was called Environmental Justice and Building Our New Grid, Where Should It All Go? This event was co-sponsored by First Parish in Bedford, in fact, along with many other distinguished environmental groups. And I want to thank our Environmental Justice Committee for bringing this event to the board's attention, in encouraging us to co-sponsor it, and promoting and supporting it in all the ways. We have a terrific Environmental Justice Committee here. They're doing great work, and it was a powerful event. And at the event, we were made aware of a proposed bill that would add additional considerations to the Massachusetts Siting Board that they would have to take into account before approving new energy projects, like where are we going to put a substation or whatever it is. And specifically, the Siting Board would have to take into account the impact of the project on climate change, the impact on public health, and whether the project would lead to an increased burden on low-income communities or communities of color, what are technically called environmental justice communities. And the goal of the bill is to introduce justice considerations into decisions that would otherwise be primarily economic or technological decisions that would be driven by cost or convenience or efficiency. The bill also requires community engagement and community impact analysis sooner rather than later in the process, right? The bill says let's start the conversation with the impacted communities right up front, right at the beginning. And by taking time to get community buy-in earlier in the process, the hope is to actually speed these projects up, not slow them down, because there will be fewer objections and lawsuits and delays on the back end. So the Environmental Justice Committee has emailed out information about the bill to our First Parish email list. You can check it out. If you decide you support it, you can sign a petition to let your representative know. I do encourage everyone to take a look at it, because the deadline to vote the bill out of committee is February 7th. So petitions of support need to go out very soon. And whether you support it or not is, of course, up to your own discernment, right? But I'm sure members of the Environmental Justice Committee would be happy to discuss it with you if you have any questions about it. Our Unitarian Universalist values tell us that we are all interdependent. We are all connected. Ultimately, there is no away. There is no away. And yet, the examples of history tell us that systems of power and privilege will turn entire communities into dumping grounds if we allow it to be so. UUs have been on the forefront of every justice movement in the 19th and 20th centuries. In the history of this country, UUs have been on the forefront of every justice movement. And in the 21st century, there is no doubt that we will continue to be on the forefront of the environmental movement. There's no doubt that we are called by the witness of our tradition and by our deepest principles to care for the earth, to care for one another. And environmental justice in the 21st century means there must be no more sacrifice zones in the name of progress. We must notice and name and resist the forces of slow violence in our communities or anyone's community. Nothing about this transformation will be easy. Nothing about the path of justice is ever easy. But it is possible. It is no paradisal dream, the poet said. Its hardship is its possibility. And if we will have the wisdom to keep trying, to keep working, to keep discerning, to keep taking step by hopeful step in solidarity with one another, we may find that we have arrived at the world we are dreaming of, very slowly and then all at once. Our closing hymn today is number 163 in your gray or cloth-bound hymnal. It's For the Earth Forever Turning. Please rise in body or spirit.
Forever
Our closing words are by Max Kapp, a poem called Gratitude. Often I have felt that I must praise my world for what my eyes and ears have seen these many years, and what my heart has loved. And often I try to start my lines, "Dear Earth," I say, and then I pause to look once more, and soon I am bemused and far away I wonder, so I never get beyond "Dear Earth." In our gratitude, in our awareness that we are all interconnected, may we come to care for our earth in a way that respects the well-being of all and is rooted in the values of love and justice. Blessed be, and amen. Go in peace.